My name is Blythe Rook. I was 47 years old, and the last thing my husband said about my sick mother in front of his employees was, "Your mother can wait. My work can't." He did not lower his voice. Malcolm stood behind the glass conference room wall with his brother Tobias beside him and 6 department managers seated around the table. Everyone heard him. So did the receptionist, the delivery driver near the elevators, and Fern Calder, his executive secretary. I had gone to Malcolm's office that Monday afternoon because my mother needed emergency treatment. Odessa Pell had been diagnosed with an aggressive form of lymphoma 5 weeks earlier. Her first infusion had gone badly, and her oncologist had moved her to a different treatment center with a stronger monitoring unit. The center could take her on Wednesday morning, but an insurance authorization had stalled. Unless someone paid the temporary deposit, they would give the chair to another patient. I had already tried our joint checking account. Malcolm had moved nearly everything into an account requiring his approval. My household credit card had been declined at the hospital pharmacy that morning. So I drove to the company we had built together and asked my husband for access to our money. He made me ask twice. "Malcolm, this isn't an elective appointment," I said through the open conference room door. "Dr. Huxley said delaying treatment could change her prognosis." Tobias looked down at his tablet. One manager studied the grain of the conference table as though it contained a message meant only for him. Malcolm remained standing. He was 51, silver beginning at his temples, with the deliberate stillness people mistook for authority. He had learned that stillness from me. When we met, he rushed every sentence and dropped documents on restaurant floors. I had taught him to pause before answering difficult questions. That afternoon, he used the lesson against me. "We're in the middle of a financing review," he said. "This company supports 83 families, and Odessa is my family. She has doctors. She has insurance. She has a treatment slot that disappears Wednesday." He glanced toward the people around the table, making sure they were still listening. Then he said the words that ended our marriage long before either of us filed anything. "Your mother can wait. My work can't." Tobias gave a quiet laugh. It lasted perhaps half a second, but I heard it. Malcolm asked Fern to show me out. I did not shout. I did not beg. I looked through the glass at the framed photograph behind him, the one taken when we opened that building 17 years earlier. Malcolm had insisted the plaque beneath it read, "Founded by Malcolm Rook." The warehouse in the photograph had belonged to me. Fern approached with her usual professional expression. She wore a navy dress and carried a square cream-colored box tied with green ribbon. "This way, Mrs. Rook," she said. She walked beside me through the open office, past people who had attended our anniversary dinners and eaten my mother's lemon cake at company picnics. No one spoke until we reached the elevators. Then Fern placed the box in both my hands. "Mr. Rook ordered candy for the financing team," she said clearly, because a security camera hung above us. "This box is for you." Her eyes met mine only once. "Please don't leave it in the car." The elevator doors opened. If stories about quiet betrayals and the truths hidden inside them matter to you, please subscribe before I tell you what Fern had put beneath those candies. I carried the box to my car and set it on the passenger seat. The ribbon remained tied during the drive home. I had no idea whether Fern had given me a clumsy consolation gift or something Malcolm had told her to pass along. At home, I placed the box on our kitchen island. The top layer held 12 dark chocolates in pleated paper cups. Nothing looked unusual until I lifted one from the lower right corner. Its paper cup did not settle back into the tray. I removed the entire molded insert. Underneath it lay a flash drive, a folded card, and my original stock certificate in Rook Adaptive Packaging. I knew the certificate immediately. It carried certificate number 1, issued when we incorporated the company. 52% of the voting shares were registered in my name. The original had been kept in the corporate records vault since 2009. I turned it over. Someone had signed my name across the assignment section. The imitation was good. The first letter swept upward the way mine did, and the final stroke bent left. But whoever copied it had hesitated between the second and third letters. Under a magnifier, that pause would leave a dark deposit of ink. I noticed it without a magnifier because before I stepped away from full-time work to care for Odessa, I had spent 19 years tracing financial fraud. Malcolm had married a forensic accountant. Apparently, he had forgotten. Fern's card contained 8 words. "The certificate leaves with you. Call me from outside." Below that was a password. I carried the box into my detached garage, shut the connecting door, and called Fern from the prepaid phone I kept in my emergency kit. My profession had left me with habits Malcolm once called excessive. Fern answered before the second ring. "Do you have it?" "I have the certificate." "Is the drive still sealed?" A strip of red evidence tape covered its connector. I told her it was. "Don't open anything on your home computer," she said. "He had Tobias install monitoring software last month." That explained why Malcolm had suddenly insisted on replacing my laptop. "Where did you get the certificate?" "From the corporate records vault. I'm the corporate secretary and I control the vault log. Malcolm handed the certificate to me Friday and ordered me to include it in tomorrow's closing binder. I saw the endorsement on the back. I knew it wasn't yours." "How?" "Because you signed the annual shareholder acknowledgments in front of me for 11 years. Fern explained that the drive held copies of records she was required to maintain: board minutes, financing drafts, email instructions, and a recorded video meeting in which she had participated. She had exported them from her own corporate secretary archive before Tobias removed her access that morning. She had not copied customer lists, product designs, or employee data. The closing binder showed that Malcolm intended to pledge my voting shares as collateral for a loan to acquire a struggling competitor. He had also represented to Hawthorne Trust Bank that I had approved a personal guarantee. "I refused to certify the shareholder consent," Fern said. "Tobias told me he'd replace the page after I assembled the binder. Why give this to me now?" "Because the bank's closing is Thursday, and because Malcolm told Tobias that after the acquisition, they could dilute you below 20%. The garage seemed to become very quiet. I looked through the window and the connecting door. From there, I could see the kitchen island and Malcolm's empty chair. "Does he know you took the certificate?" "Not yet. I left a color copy in the binder and recorded the removal in the vault log. I wrote that the original was delivered to its registered owner." That mattered. Fern had not hidden what she had done. She had transferred my property directly to me and created a contemporaneous record of the transfer. "Meet me tomorrow at 8, I said, "not near the office. I know a cafe across from the county courthouse." When the call ended, I put the flash drive and certificate back beneath the candy tray. Then I retied the ribbon, carried the box upstairs, and locked it inside the fire safe in my closet. The safe key remained on my ring. I slept in the guest room that night. Malcolm came home after midnight and stood outside the closed door. "I know today was unpleasant," he said, "but you can't interrupt a confidential meeting whenever Odessa has another crisis." I stared at the strip of hallway light beneath the door. "My mother has cancer." "Everything is a catastrophe with you now." He waited for an answer. I gave him none. His footsteps retreated toward the primary bedroom, and a few minutes later, I heard the lock turn. At 8 the next morning, Fern sat in the rear corner of the courthouse cafe with a cup of tea she had not touched. She looked older than she had the day before. Her hair was pulled back too tightly, and a faint red line crossed her wrist where she had removed her watch. "I brought the vault log," she said. She slid a printed page across the table. Her signature appeared beside the time she removed the certificate. Beneath it, she had written that she delivered it to me at 3:42 p.m. near the executive elevators. I asked how she had learned about the plan to dilute my shares. Fern opened her phone and showed me a meeting invitation Malcolm had sent her 6 days earlier. She, Malcolm, and Tobias had joined by video from separate offices. The invitation stated that the meeting concerned capitalization planning, which fell within her duties as corporate secretary. During that call, Malcolm had instructed Tobias to create a new class of voting shares after the acquisition. Fern had asked whether my approval was required. Malcolm had replied, "Not after the bank owns her leverage." The platform automatically recorded meetings because Malcolm had enabled compliance archiving during a prior audit. Fern had downloaded the recording through the archive she administered. She had watched Malcolm use controls as weapons for years. This time, one of those controls had preserved his own voice. "I need to tell you something else," Fern said. "Yesterday wasn't the first time he blocked your access to money." She showed me 3 rent transfers from the building account. The company leased the warehouse from a limited liability company I owned before my marriage. For the previous 4 months, Malcolm had directed the rent into an internal operating account rather than the property account named in the lease. He had taken income from my separate property and made me ask him for money that was already mine. Have you ever discovered that someone had been making you feel dependent while quietly using what belonged to you? I folded the vault log and handed it back to Fern. "You keep the original," I said. "My attorney will make a verified copy." She blinked. "You already have an attorney?" "I've had one since my father transferred the warehouse to me." Quentin Barstow had drafted the original lease and shareholder agreement. He was 60, careful with language, and almost impossible to surprise. He came to the cafe at 9 after I called his private number. I retrieved the candy box from my car, where I had kept it beside me during the short drive. In front of Fern and Quentin, I unlocked the fire-safe small travel case, removed the certificate and flash drive, and placed both on the table. Quentin photographed the sealed drive, read the serial number aloud, and wrote it on an evidence envelope. Fern signed a statement confirming she had handed both items to me. I signed that I was transferring the flash drive to Quentin for forensic imaging. He placed it in the envelope and sealed it. The stock certificate stayed with me. Quentin studied the endorsement for several seconds. "This signature won't survive examination," he said. "It may not have to. If the bank closes before we challenge it, Malcolm gets control of the acquisition funds." Quentin looked at Fern. "Does Hawthorne have the original?" "No, only a scan. The original was supposed to arrive tomorrow morning." "That gives us 1 day." He called Sabine Morrowfield, the bank's senior risk officer, from the cafe. Sabine had worked with me on an embezzlement investigation years earlier, but she did not accept my word as proof. She asked Quentin to send a written fraud notice, a copy of my identification, and the original shareholder records. "That's the correct answer," I said after he ended the call. Quentin almost smiled. By noon, we were sitting inside Hawthorne Trust's downtown office. Sabine compared my identification with the guarantee in the loan file. The forged signature looked less convincing beside 6 verified samples. "We will pause closing for 48 hours, she said. "That is not a finding of fraud. It is a risk hold." "48 hours is enough," Quentin replied. Sabine turned to me. "Mr. Rook will be notified that a purported guarantor disputed authorization. Bank policy requires it." I expected that. My phone rang as we left the building. Malcolm did not greet me. "What did you tell Hawthorne?" "The truth. You walked into a bank and accused your own husband of fraud during the largest transaction this company has ever attempted." I disputed a signature I didn't write. "The guarantee supports an acquisition that protects our future. My mother's treatment protects hers." He went silent for a moment. Then his voice changed. The anger disappeared, and something colder replaced it. "You've made a serious mistake, Blythe." The call ended. 20 minutes later, my household card began working again. That was Malcolm's first counterattack. He wanted the financial restriction to look accidental before anyone examined it. It was clever. It was also too late. Cressida Vale, the patient advocate at the cancer center, met me that afternoon. She had already reviewed Odessa's insurance correspondence and found that the authorization had been routed under an outdated treatment code. The correction might take several days, so Cressida offered another option. Odessa owned a paid-up life insurance policy with accessible cash value. 2 years earlier, after a minor stroke, she had given me durable financial power of attorney. The original power of attorney was inside my mother's home safe. Odessa told me where she kept the key, in a blue ceramic jar above her refrigerator. I drove to her bungalow, took the key from the jar, opened the safe, and removed the document while she watched from the kitchen table. Then I returned the key to the same jar. At the treatment center, Cressida copied the document and returned the original directly to me. The insurer verified my authority by phone and agreed to release enough from Odessa's policy to cover the temporary deposit. My mother's treatment no longer depended on Malcolm. When I told her what he had said, she did not cry. Odessa had spent 38 years teaching middle school science. She had handled exploding beakers, angry parents, and one principal who believed girls should not use power tools. She rested her hand beside mine on the hospital blanket. "Did you get the chair?" "Yes." "Then deal with the rest after they put the medicine in me." Wednesday morning, Odessa began treatment. Malcolm did not call to ask whether she had made it. Instead, a courier arrived at the hospital waiting room shortly after lunch. He checked my identification and handed me an envelope. I signed his delivery screen, and he left. Inside was a notice stating that the company had placed me on administrative exclusion for suspected theft of confidential data. It barred me from the office, warehouse systems, and employee communications. Malcolm had also called an emergency board meeting for Thursday. The agenda included removal of Fern as corporate secretary and suspension of my voting rights pending an investigation. He had moved quickly because he understood the shareholder agreement almost as well as I did. Almost. Quentin answered on the first ring. "He can exclude you from systems while investigating data theft," he said. "He cannot suspend registered shares without a court order." "He'll seek one." He already has. Malcolm's attorneys had filed an emergency petition claiming that Fern and I had conspired to sabotage the acquisition. They described the flash drive as stolen proprietary property and me as emotionally unstable because of my mother's illness. The filing attached an email that appeared to show me telling Fern to take everything. I had never sent it. But the message had come from my home account. That was why Malcolm had replaced my laptop. For the first time, I understood how long he had been preparing. Quentin arranged for a forensic technician to examine my devices. The home laptop showed remote access sessions initiated through administrator credentials belonging to Tobias. That helped us, but not enough. The court could still restrict both sides until a full hearing. If that happened, Malcolm's managerial proxy might remain in force, and the bank could eventually accept a revised deal without my guarantee. He did not need to prove I was guilty. He only needed to create uncertainty long enough to finish. On Friday, while Odessa slept through the final hour of her infusion, a deputy entered the treatment room with another order. The judge had directed us to preserve and surrender the original flash drive to a neutral forensic examiner. Quentin had anticipated that. He arrived carrying the sealed evidence envelope, and in front of the deputy, he transferred it to Everett Dane, the court-appointed examiner. Everett checked the serial number against Quentin's evidence log and gave each of us a receipt. The drive left our possession. Malcolm believed that mattered because his lawyers immediately argued that anything copied from it should remain sealed until its ownership was determined. For 4 days, the recording that could expose him sat beyond my reach. Fern was fired before sunset. Security Chief Ivor Knox supervised while she emptied her desk into 2 cartons. Malcolm required the staff to watch from the central office floor, supposedly so no company property disappeared. Fern called me from the parking garage afterward. He made Ivor inspect my purse. "I'm sorry." Ivor found 3 peppermints and my inhaler. Very dangerous. Her attempted humor failed halfway through. I heard her breathing change. "I should have acted sooner," she said. "I watched him move money and assumed it was aggressive management. Then I watched him isolate you, and I told myself marriages were private. You acted when you had evidence. He says I'll never work in corporate administration again. He doesn't get to decide that." At the emergency hearing the following Wednesday, Malcolm nearly won. The courtroom was open to the public. Tobias sat behind his brother, flanked by department managers who had been told the company might collapse because of me. Several employees stood along the rear wall. Malcolm's attorney argued that the shareholder certificate had been removed without board authorization. He said my dispute endangered a pending acquisition and 83 jobs. Then Malcolm testified. He wore the charcoal suit I had bought him for our 20th anniversary. He told Judge Lenore Pritchard that I had approved the guarantee during a conversation at home. According to him, I became hostile only after he refused to divert business funds for my mother. His attorney displayed a text from my phone. Do whatever is needed to close. I recognized the message. I had sent it 6 months earlier during a lease renewal negotiation. The screenshot concealed the date and the messages surrounding it. Quentin objected, but the damage had been deliberate. People in the gallery whispered. Malcolm looked toward me with an expression of patient concern. He had turned his public cruelty into evidence that I was irrational. For 10 minutes, I thought the judge might preserve his authority until trial. Then Everett entered through the side door. The court examiner had recovered the full recording from Fern's drive and matched its digital fingerprint to the conferencing platform's compliance archive. The file had not been altered. The archive showed Fern was an authorized participant and custodian. Judge Pritchard listened through headphones while the courtroom waited. No one could hear what she heard, but I watched Malcolm's confidence change. His shoulders remained straight, yet his right shoe stopped moving beneath the witness stand. The judge removed the headphones. I will hear the recording in open court, she said. Malcolm's attorney asked to approach. The judge refused. The clerk played the video. Fern appeared first, sitting in her office. Tobias joined from the finance suite. Malcolm connected last. After 7 minutes of acquisition figures, Fern asked whether issuing new voting shares required my approval. Malcolm leaned back on the screen. Blythe won't have enough voting power to stop us after closing. Tobias asked what would happen if I refused to endorse my certificate. Malcolm answered, I practiced it. The bank seized thousands of signatures. No one whispered after that. The recording continued. Tobias mentioned the diverted warehouse rent. Malcolm told him to keep moving it because financial pressure made me easier to manage. He also said my mother's illness had distracted me at the perfect time. The courtroom remained silent when the video ended. What would you have done at that moment? Looked at the person who betrayed you, or kept your eyes on the institution, finally forced to see him clearly? I watched Judge Pritchard. She ordered Hawthorne Trust to maintain the financing hold. She suspended Malcolm's managerial proxy over my shares and prohibited any change to the company's capitalization. She also restored Fern's access solely for the purpose of preserving corporate records. But she did not remove Malcolm as chief executive. Not yet. The full power of my position rested in a clause even Malcolm had misread. When my father transferred the warehouse to me before my wedding, Quentin drafted a lease between my property company and Rook Adaptive Packaging. Years later, when I invested the warehouse and my savings into Malcolm's business plan, Quentin tied the lease to the shareholder agreement. An attempted unauthorized pledge of my shares triggered 2 consequences. My operating proxy ended immediately, and the majority shareholder gained the right to call a special meeting on 10 days' notice. I had 52%. Malcolm had treated those shares like decoration because I had let him vote them for years. Now the proxy was gone. Outside the courthouse, Quentin handed me the original stock certificate. Everett had returned it after examination, and Quentin had signed the receipt. I placed the certificate inside my leather document case and locked the brass clasp. Fern waited near the steps. She was not smiling. Did he know about the clause, she asked. He knew the words. He assumed no court would find a breach before closing. What happens now? We call a shareholder meeting. Malcolm anticipated that move. Before we could leave the courthouse plaza, employees began receiving messages announcing that the warehouse might close. He claimed I intended to terminate the company's lease and sell the property to a developer. By evening, 2 local suppliers had suspended shipments. A production supervisor called Fern and said workers were discussing a walkout. Malcolm had shifted the battleground. If he could make me look dangerous to the workforce, removing him might destroy the company anyway. I could have terminated the lease. His diversion of rent and fraudulent pledge both qualified as defaults. Instead, I drove to the warehouse on Thursday morning with Quentin and the court order. Ivor met us at the gate. I have instructions not to admit Mrs. Rook, he said. Quentin handed him a certified copy of the order. Ivor read it twice, called the company's outside counsel, and finally raised the barrier. "He told us you were selling the building," Ivor said as we passed. "I'm not." That was all I gave him. The factory floor smelled of cardboard dust and machine oil. Conveyor belts carried folded cartons beneath bright inspection lamps. People slowed as I walked by. Malcolm had gathered supervisors in the loading bay. Tobias stood beside a portable speaker, and a company photographer had been positioned near the emergency exit. It was staged as carefully as the conference room humiliation. Malcolm stepped forward. "You have no operational role here. I'm a majority shareholder and the owner of this building. You're frightening employees during a financing crisis you created." A semicircle formed around us. Some people held phones at their sides, recording without pretending otherwise. I kept my voice level. "The warehouse lease will remain in place. Payroll will continue. Supplier obligations incurred in the ordinary course will be honored." "You can't promise that." "I can, because Hawthorne agreed this morning to maintain the existing operating facility while the court reviews the disputed acquisition." Malcolm's expression tightened. Sabina had approved the arrangement after receiving verified rent records and the judge's order. The bank would protect normal operations but release nothing for the acquisition. His crisis had just lost its deadline. Tobias lifted the speaker microphone. "This is not a shareholder forum." "No," I said. "That meeting is next Friday at 10 in the company atrium. Notice was delivered to both of you this morning." Quentin had sent the notices by courier while Malcolm was arranging his performance. Both brothers had signed for their envelopes at 8:17. Tobias looked toward Malcolm. That was when the employees understood Malcolm had not told them everything. The days before the meeting were not calm. Malcolm offered retention bonuses to managers who signed statements questioning my mental stability. 2 refused and sent the offers to Fern. A third accepted, then withdrew after learning the payment would come from restricted acquisition funds. Tobias attempted to delete rent transfer instructions from the accounting system. The compliance archive preserved them, and Sabine's bank records supplied the receiving entries. Fern spent those days in a temporary office at Quentin's firm, rebuilding the corporate minute book. Every file she handled was logged. Every interview had a witness. I returned to the treatment center with Odessa on Monday. Her blood counts were better than expected, though she was tired enough to fall asleep while holding a paper cup. Dr. Armand Huxley said the next infusion could proceed on schedule. Malcolm had sent her flowers. The card read, "Wishing you strength during this family misunderstanding." Odessa read it once and handed it to me. "What shall I do with those?" I asked. "Give them to the nurses. Keep the vase. It looks sturdy." The shareholder meeting took place on Friday, March 22nd. The date mattered because Malcolm's attorneys had challenged our notice period twice. 10 full days had passed since delivery. The company atrium was usually used for product launches and holiday lunches. That morning, folding chairs filled the polished concrete floor. Employees stood along the mezzanine railings. Suppliers, bank representatives, and 2 reporters occupied the rear row because Malcolm himself had invited them, expecting a public victory. Everett served as neutral meeting referee under the court's order. Ivor and 2 contracted security officers waited beside the elevators. Malcolm arrived with Tobias and 3 attorneys. He paused for the cameras, then took the front table as if nothing had changed. I sat opposite him with Quentin and Fern. The cream candy box rested beneath my chair. Inside it, under the empty chocolate tray, lay the original stock certificate. I had carried it from my locked document case that morning and had not let it out of my possession. Everett called the meeting to order. Fern read the shareholder register. My 52% was confirmed. Malcolm held 33% and Tobias held the remaining 15%. Malcolm's attorney objected to my shares because of the forged endorsement. Everett asked who claimed to own them. "Hawthorne Trust," the attorney replied. Sabine rose from the rear row. "The bank disclaims any interest arising from that endorsement," she said. "We did not accept the pledge." The objection collapsed in less than a minute. I introduced the first resolution, removal of Malcolm as chief executive for cause. Quentin did not deliver a long speech. Fern played 3 short sections of the authenticated recording. Sabine confirmed the diverted rent. A production manager described being offered money for a statement about my mental health. Then Malcolm spoke. He did not deny the signature anymore. Instead, he claimed necessity. He said the acquisition would have doubled revenue. He said I had lost the discipline required to understand risk. He said founders sometimes had to make decisions their spouses could not bear. Finally, he turned toward the employees. Everything I did was for this company. A voice came from the mezzanine. Then why did you lie to us? I did not see who said it. Malcolm looked upward, but no one moved. Everett called the vote. My shares voted for removal. Malcolm's voted against it. Tobias hesitated before voting with his brother. The resolution passed. The second resolution removed Tobias as chief financial officer and appointed an interim executive chosen from the existing operations team. That passed as well. Everett announced the results into the microphone. They echoed through the atrium where Malcolm had celebrated every promotion, every award, and every year he allowed people to call him the sole founder. He remained seated. This meeting is invalid, he said. Quentin nodded to Ivor. Ivor approached the front table with the court order authorizing security to enforce the shareholder resolutions and protect company records. Mr. Rook, he said, your building access has been revoked. I need your badge and office keys. Malcolm looked at me. Perhaps he expected anger. Perhaps he hoped I would enjoy the moment enough to make a mistake. I only waited. He removed his badge and set it on the table. Then he took a key ring from his jacket pocket and handed it directly to Ivor. Tobias surrendered his badge next. His keys were already held by facilities because he had left them in his office during the meeting. Security escorted both brothers through the atrium. No one applauded. That made the silence heavier. At the elevators, Malcolm stopped. You're going to lose everything trying to prove it was yours. I reached beneath my chair and lifted the candy box. No, I said. I'm leaving with what was mine before you touched it. The elevator doors closed between us. I carried the box upstairs to the executive floor. Fern walked beside me, no longer showing me out. Inside Malcolm's office, the old opening day photograph still hung on the wall. I removed it from its hook and turned it over. My father's handwriting covered the backing paper. For Blythe, who supplied the roof before anyone else had a dream. I had forgotten that note existed. Malcolm had hidden it against the wall for 17 years. Fern found a clean archive carton. I placed the photograph inside, then added the candy box containing my stock certificate. I closed the carton myself and carried it out of the office. The company remained open. I did not become chief executive. Running machinery, negotiating resin prices, and managing national retail contracts had never been my ambition. The operations director accepted the interim role, and 6 months later, the employees gained an ownership stake through a structured purchase supported by Hawthorne. I kept enough shares to protect the warehouse and the people working inside it. The rest became something Malcolm had never considered valuable: distributed power. Our divorce ended quietly the following winter. There was no dramatic confrontation on courthouse steps. Malcolm kept his personal investments and the contents of his rented apartment. I retained the warehouse, my remaining shares, and the income he had diverted from the property account. The house was sold. I did not want its locked bedroom doors. Odessa completed her treatment in November. Her hair returned softer and almost white, which she claimed made her look distinguished. On clear mornings, she walked 3 blocks to a neighborhood bakery and complained that their lemon cake needed more zest. Fern found another corporate position, but not immediately. She spent the summer helping me reopen my forensic accounting practice in a renovated loft above the warehouse offices. One rainy afternoon, she arrived carrying 2 cups of tea and a familiar cream-colored box. I thought we deserved the candies this time, she said. We sat beside the loft window while rain streaked the glass. Below us, employees crossed the loading yard beneath bright umbrellas. Odessa was in the next room, arguing with a printer that refused to accept cardstock. Fern untied the green ribbon. "I almost gave you the drive in an envelope," she said. "Why didn't you?" An envelope looked like evidence. Candy looked like an apology. It was neither. "No," she said. It was an exit. We ate 2 chocolates and saved the rest for Odessa. I saw Malcolm only once after that. He was across the street from the warehouse, standing beside a small sedan while Tobias loaded sample cases into the trunk. They had started a consulting business together. Malcolm glanced toward the building, but the traffic light changed before our eyes met. I did not wonder whether he regretted anything. Inside the loft, Odessa called for help with the printer, and Fern laughed because the machine had begun feeding blank pages onto the floor. The old candy box remained on my desk. It no longer held evidence or shares. Odessa had filled it with handwritten recipes, including the lemon cake she used to bring to company picnics. On the underside of the lid, I had taped my father's faded note. The roof was still mine. Thank you for staying with me. Goodbye for now, and join me for the next story.